Hello everyone, and once again welcome to Bar Class. This is the third episode in the series, and today we are finally going to be able to get into the actual meat of Beyond All Reason and look at the game and the gameplay. So I'm going to be showing you two different very basic build orders for Armada and Cortex, which are more or less going to be the same with some minor differences between the two due to faction differences. We're going to be looking at more or less what to build and when, how to identify mexes, how to figure out your lane, and looking at it through the focus of a map rotation player. So where you're going to be playing on a variety of maps and figuring out where you need to go, what you need to do in different situations. Some players tend to play a single map for most of their bar career, whether that is All That Glitters, All That Smolders, All That Simmers, or Supreme Ismuth. These are your two separate single map pools that players sometimes play. And then your third option is to be a rotation player, a map rotation player, where every game is played on a different map, which is a far more dynamic and in many ways difficult setting to be in because the map is consistently different, and so what players do is consistently different. So we're currently looking at Bismuth, which is a pretty popular map in the rotation pool. And this is quite useful for illustrating important concepts. So one thing to notice is when you're playing in a rotation lobby, there are normally 8 players, which means that each player is going to have a lane. And so a lane is where you are supposed to fight, take the mexes, and control. And normally a lane is almost a straight line across the map. And each lane is supposed to match up to its opposing lane. So you will want to take your mexes and make sure that your opponent is not messing with your allies too much in an opposing lane. And to do this, you need to have an idea of where you need to be. So for example, these are the 8 lanes. You have your top lane here, which often becomes a duo lane due to the nature of the map. You have the third lane, you have this lane which has terrain in it, so often this becomes a tech position or an air position, which is the current meta. You have the middle lane, which often also becomes a duo lane, and due to the geothermal, often becomes the tech position. And then you have the bottom 2 lanes, which need to work together, but due to how the terrain is, the fact that this is a mountain here, and there's 2 more slight mountains here, then often these 2 lanes fight 2 individual 1v1s, and this lane can either leak into the bottom lane and fight down here, or leak up and fight over here. So when I say leak, this is another concept, but effectively it's where you get opponents past, or where you get units past your opponent's front line, and use it to go deal damage to either infrastructure, resources, or even just intercepting units going to the front. And leaks are very, very common. So you need to have a plan to deal with units getting past the front line. And this can either be for your air player or any response units that you have. But not the focus of this video. The focus of this video is going to be basically a build order that you get to use at any point in Beyond All Reason that you need to make some slight adaptations to because of how resources are variable, maps are variable, and resources on the maps are sometimes variable. So you need to always be thinking a little bit about your build, because what works one time is not always going to work another time. So on the screen, you can see this notepad build order that I've brought up here, which is a very basic build order for Armada. So I'd recommend you always open 3 mexes, 3 metal extractors, which we already know, as we've gone through it previously, is the unit that gets metal. After you build your 3 metal extractors, it is recommended to build 1 solar, because the metal extractors will be draining your energy and producing metal, So this gives you a way to balance your economy, as a solar costs no energy and only costs metal. Following that, due to how Armada works, wind is generally recommended over solars or Armada due to the fact that Armada has a slightly cheaper wind turbine at 40 metal and 175 energy, while Cortex has a wind turbine for 43 metal and 175 energy. After you finish 2 winds normally, but again this depends because you also need to look at your wind speed. If the wind is at 0, you need to build another solar. If the wind is above 7, you can probably build winds. If the wind is below 7, I'd recommend a second solar. You want to then drop either a bot lab or a vehicle lab. And in that lab, you should then queue up what units you wish to create. A very simple queue is, for example, 1 conbot into 5 ticks, into another conbot, into 3 pawns. And the reason you want these units is ticks are very good for scouting and harassing and gaining information, whilst pawns are much better combatants that can deal with any enemy ticks, any enemy pawns or grunts that are running in, and give you some flexibility. You then produce a third con normally, which will act as a way to help build power on your lab, or you can send it to the front to help with producing defenses on the front line. I would normally recommend rocket bots, but maces are fine, or producing more pawns are sometimes fine, depending on how the map is playing and what your role in the game is. It's also useful to build a resurrection bot or a res bot to help repair your rocket bots and to revive any ones that you've lost, into producing more rocket bots and cons. And I'll then discuss a little bit about the lab being on repeat. Once you finish this lab and you've queued up this build queue, again, you don't need to queue up all of this, you can fix it and fill it in as you are playing. This is just a basic recommendation. You then want to build wins with your commander, because you're going to be relatively balanced on wind, but slowly draining it. Once you've finished about 2 more wins with your commander, if the wind has been high, you should consider assisting your lab to get out your first construction bot. After you finish this construction bot, you should have your commander continue making more wins, and you should send your first construction bot to go and take any mexes that are near your base in your lane. You don't want to take mexes from other lanes. People will not be happy if you're stealing their mexes. And you want to get to about 150 to 200 energy income before you start moving your commander out of your base. Once you do want to move your commander out of your base, you want to drop 1 LLT, a light laser tower, to defend your base from any leaks, any enemy units that reach it. And this will let you worry more about your APM on the front line than having to constantly look at your base to defend it. And that's the basics of an opening build order. But it's very important to remember to be flexible. You need to adapt to what is happening and what you are seeing on the map. If you see a lot of enemy units running at your base, you need to make more defenses or more units to defend against them. If you don't see any enemy units, you can get away with making some more economy, making some more build power, expanding faster. If the wind is terrible and you have to build more solars, then you're going to have less metal to produce units. If the wind is very good, you're going to have more E than you expect, and so you can assist with build power with your commander and such things. But one thing to note, I've mentioned the commander needs to move out, and the reason for that is you need to send your commander to the front line. And the front line is normally the middle of the map. This is where you want to get your commander relatively quickly, so that you can both take the mexes along the path with your commander, and that's very important, is as you're moving forward, take all the mexes that you can with the commander. And also you want to drop defenses on the front line, so that the enemy cannot just run through you and leak into your bases, because bases are very prone to dying to enemy units. But okay, so we have this notepad build order, so I'm going to show you more or less what it looks like, so you have a vague idea of what you're going for. And then afterwards, I will put up a more detailed explanation of what I've just said, in case anyone wants to look at this and go through it. But again, I'm going to recommend you need to keep in mind that every situation is different. Known as ESID. Every situation is different. You need to be flexible. This is just an idea, a basic idea for a build order that you can copy when you're beginning, but you need to adapt for each map. Okay, so let us get into the game and show what this build order looks like, more or less. So when you place your commander, you want to minimize your movement time. In the wait queue, you can already start placing buildings down. But if you just place buildings down, you're going to cancel your previous order. So to queue up orders, you need to use the shift key. So you can have shift commands, and this is how you will queue up your build. And again, you don't want your commander moving too much, so you need to place your commander as close to the mexes as possible, but not either on top of the blueprint of the structure you're building, and preferably not out of range of this blueprint. Unfortunately, on this map, you have to walk a little bit to take all the mexes, but as long as this green circle around the commander, is in range of the actual structure, the commander should not walk to build it. So let's show you this. But as I said, you're going to go 3 mexes into a solar. And again, you don't want to place your solar down here, because your commander is going to walk up, which means the solar is going to be out of range. So you want to place the solar close to where your commander is going to stop walking. You're going to want 2 winds, and then you're going to want to drop a lab. I would recommend a bot lab. A vehicle lab is slightly more expensive and is slightly less flexible early game, but is very good in the middle and late game. But for now, I'm going to show the bot build order. Okay, so this is the queue, and you can even go further and queue up 2 more wins, because this is, again, part of the build order. The game will start, and you will load in. And it's important to pay attention to the wind speed. Once your solar is building, you want to look at the wind speed. So we have the mexes being built. They build relatively quickly, about 5-6 seconds per mex. Now you're going to see the commander is going to turn and walk up to build this mex. And we see that this solar is in range to be built once this mex is completed. There we go, the commander doesn't walk at all. But wind is very low at the moment, so we need to keep an eye on it. It is climbing now, so there's a good chance we don't need to place another solar. But if wind stayed at 3 before this solar begins, or before this wind begins, you want to drop another solar. But wind is climbing, so we're good. There are some important keys to notice while we're here. High priority is something that you can use to change your spending. Don't worry about it too much, but do take note of these keys for now. So on the lab, we're going to queue up a construction bot, and we can set a rally point. The con bot, if you've used my previous settings, will not follow this rally point. We're going to queue up 5 ticks, which are fast scout bots, which will follow the rally point. And you can shift queue the rally point, or you can just right click it. You're going to then queue up another con. You're going to queue up 3 pawns, another con, and we'll leave it there for now. So the commander went idle there, which is pretty bad. You want to send your conbot back to take mexes that are not in the path of your commander. You want to then assist out the lab and build another windmill. Another useful hotkey here is Alt, which will auto-group your units. So now all your ticks that are built will be auto-grouped to 1. So if I press 1, it goes there. So Alt 1 sets a hotkey group for any unit that's built. So we see we've boosted out another con. I'm going to drop 1 more windmill, and then I'm going to send my commander to the front, taking every single mex on the way, and then dropping an LLT and radar. I'm now going to take the spawn. If you press Control number, you'll get that hotkey group. But you see, if I press 2, this pawn is not part of that hotkey. But if I press Alt 2, Now, all of the pawns that are created are part of the hotkey group. So use the hotkey groups. They're very useful when you're beginning. Later on, you'll find some issues that the hotkey groups create, and they're pretty easy to solve with micro, and go from there. So now my lab is idle, and that's bad. So what you want to do, once you've queued this up, is start building rocket bots. Because your ticks have reached the front line, they could be way deeper in the enemy base. Your pawns have reached the front line, and they can be dealing damage. You should know what's happening. So now you have rocket bots coming out. And if you want to make sure that your lab doesn't go idle, you can put repeat on. And this means that the lab is going to keep on making whatever the production queue is. So it'll just keep infinitely making rocket bots at this point. If you want to add to the queue, you just simply add to the queue, and it'll keep everything that's building in there and go from there. And this is the basics of a build order. But again, you need to pay attention, because now you've got a lot of mexes, you need to keep scaling your energy. So as your metal income increases, you need to increase your energy income. Another useful hotkey if you're using the grid keys that I've shown you is space. Space will allow you to insert a command in front of already ordered commands. So the commander built this windmill before building the mechs that he had already queued. At this stage, you can kind of do what you need to do based on the information you're getting. It's very useful to drop a construction tower in your base to help with build order issues. And you can start just queuing up some more resources, as well as I've queued up the Lazarus here, which is the repair or res bot. And this will let you reclaim any resources on the map, but this map doesn't have resources to reclaim. If one of your units dies, it can resurrect them with, not restore, resurrect. And if any of your units are damaged, you just press right or R, and you drag your left mouse button, and any units in the circle will be repaired. And if you want to leave it that way, you just put repeat on, and then any units that enter this circle that are friendly will be repaired by the res bot. Pay attention to these. They aren't the cheapest units in the game, but they are very useful. And if you fight command, they will also move along repairing and reclaiming anything there is. And so this is the basics of a build order. You take all of your mexes as quickly as you can, you make enough units to sustain, and you are able to fight in your front line. And after this, the game gets difficult. But for now, this is where we're going to stop.
Battle paused.
So, if we go look at the more detailed notepad, you'll see I've got some explanations of where things go. I'd also strongly recommend that after about 10 to 15 rocket bots, you stop producing rocket bots, as they suffer from a fall off in their value as their numbers increase. One rocket bot is not very useful. 10 to 15 rocket bots are at their maximum value, and more than that, they start losing value against enemy rocket bots, against tier 2 units, and other such things. So you want to have about 10 to 15 rocket bots. And then generally, it's better to go into pawns instead of rocket bots or maces, once you've already got a established amount. And overall maces are slightly worse than rocket bots. But again, depending on what you're doing, that is not always the case. And that's where I'm going to leave it for the Armada order. Next, we will be looking at the Cortex build order, which is going to be very similar, so I'll speed through it. I'll just show the build order for Cortex, and we'll continue from there. Okay, so let's quickly take a look at the Cortex build order. I definitely didn't just record this video already and then forget to remove the build order while I showed it in bar. But this is very similar to the Armada build order. And we're going to open with 3 mexes, but with Cortex, I think double solar is a much more stable opening. Cortex has a cheaper solar than Armada does, 150 metal, and more expensive winds at 43 metal. So this means that Cortex, you generally are more favored to build solars slightly than winds. But on the high end, wind is always more efficient than solars. We're going to once again open a bot lab, though you can go a vehicle lab with a similar queue, but this time we have 5 grunts instead of 5 ticks. I'd actually recommend maybe 3 grunts as being a more standard opening, and then having some more grunts produced after your second con is out. And the reason for this is that Cortex has not got a equivalent unit to the tick, which is a light scout bot, whilst the grunt is a light assault bot, which means the grunt is the equivalent of the pawn for Armada. But the grunt is very good against ticks, as it has a laser, and so you can use grunts in a similar role, and they are cheaper than pawns. After that, we'll build more winds, while assisting out some units with our commander. But again, if the wind is bad, you're going to build more solars and less winds. And once you're ready to move your commander out of your base, you can drop a LLT to defend your base if you feel that's necessary, and move your commander to the front. The first con is going to go back and take any mexes that are useful and out there, and then you're going to play the game as it continues. Okay, so let's get into it. So when you want to play Cortex, you need to choose Cortex at the bottom here instead of Armada. We're going to start in the same spawn, so we're going to queue up a similar build. So Mex, 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 and then Solar, Solar. And remember again, you want to minimize building, so you don't want to build any of your solars too far away, because then you will walk. So Solar, Solar into a bot lab. And then I would build 2 winds. You'll see exactly where the commander is. You can always place it here. And then adjust as necessary. Okay, let's go. So, we have the shift queued commands here of our base. We're going to build each mechs at about the same time. Well, at exactly the same speed as Armada does. Commanders are about the same between both factions, though Cortex is a little bit more clunky when it comes to the D-gun, which is a very useful disintegrator gun that one-shots any units that it hits in a line. So that's part of why you want your commander at the front line. It is a great combat and utility unit, and that's why you will be sending your commander to the front line very quickly. So you see the solars are building here. Wind was fine. You could have built winds instead of the solar. But solar is, as I've said, a little bit better for Cortex, so you don't need to worry about it too much. We'll queue up once again our construction bot into 5 grunts, into construction bot, into 5 rocketeers. And to queue up 5 at a time, you use shift. Shift queues up 5, control queues up 20. And you just right click to remove it. Queue another con, res, rocket bots, and that should be the queue for now. And you can just put down some more windmills while you're waiting. If you want to interject in your build order, you press space and then right click, and you'll jump ahead. But be careful, you need to pay attention to your energy. So now you take your con, you go back, you take your mexes, you queue up some wind so that the con isn't idle once it finishes, and you're slowly scaling your economy. So you see the wind is high, so once again we're going to build some more winds. We're going to have our commander assist. To create the auto hot groups, you press Alt and 1 again. So now all of our grunts are going to go onto hotkey 1, and that's how we do it. If we wanted to specifically take these 2 grunts, you'd press Control 2, and it'll reassign them. So everything else will be on these hotkeys.
Need power.
Be very careful if your commander's assisting to not go empty on energy, which is what I did there while explaining. Keep scaling a little bit of wind. You want to get to about 150, I'd advise. Then I'll assist the conbot out. Now your commander is going to want to leave the base. You can drop an LLT if you feel uncomfortable. This will help defend your base. But this does draw energy, so you need a little bit more E for that. Drop 1 more wind, and then you send your commander to the front line. Drop your LLTs, drop a radar. Radar is very useful. And you've already got a rocket bot out and heading to the front before your commander. This is a little bit slow in all honesty. The LLT slows down the expansion a fair bit. If you press Alt 2 on the rocket bot, it will still keep the 2 grunts we've assigned previously to control key 2 in that group. So if you want to move them, you can either press Control 3, or you can just press Alt 1 and return them into the hotkey. So due to the LLT, we've stalled a little bit on our M production. And this is why the LLT is very much an optional thing. If the commander had been moving forward faster, you would have had these resources sooner, and you wouldn't have to worry about it. But this is still fine. You're very stable and safe. If your grunts get to the front line and you find the enemy commander, do not engage. You don't want to fight against the enemy yet. You just want to fight any ticks that are coming, kill any scouts or light units that you can. And if you see a way to get into the enemy and possibly kill their constructors, then you want to do so. This is very much a safe, stable opening with the same ideas as the Armada opening. You've got your 2 con bots assisting the lab now, scaling your build power. If you need to scale your build power more, you can drop a construction turret from the build queue, which is for me V and A, and this will help with your spending, but it's pretty expensive, so it's not fully recommended to do it yet. Commander's getting to the front. If you feel comfortable with your build power, you can choose one of these and send it to the front to help with the defenses, but you're going to find your scaling gets a little bit slower. At this point, you should be considering what units you want to make. It's probably another construction bot, and then you can put either rocket bots or grunts on repeat. And please remember the repeat command for your factory. It's very helpful to make sure you don't idle. And so this is the general idea behind the openings. You have a reasonable amount of units, you have the ability to push somewhat aggressively, and you have mostly secured your lane. It is possible, as you get more confident in what you're doing, to do all of this a lot faster, because any idle time, any non-clicking is bad. But for now, don't worry too much about that. It's more important to be able to control your lane, control your area, make sure that this remains stable in your game. So, let me bring up the notepad once again. So this is the basic idea of the build queue.
Battle paused.
You follow this along more or less the same, but again, remember, adapt to what is happening. Every situation is different. You need to be flexible. And this is, I'll bring it up on screen, slightly larger, the more detailed one, which more or less follows the same as the Armada, so please take a screenshot of this if you would like. It explains where your first con goes to take mexes, the commander needs to assist out any units, and I left ticks here, but grunts, an ex-constructor. When it can. Again, this is important to remember when it can. You need to have enough energy to assist it out. Do not stall your eco. Do not stall this thing. This is very important. You want your commander at the front because your commander is a great utility unit, very good in combat, does many things. So you want it at the front. And taking mexes, because it's the best way to scale your economy. The second conbot stays at the factory and helps with scaling. And nice, I left grunts here. And at this point, your grunt should be out and you should have an idea of what the enemy is doing. So now you can queue up rocket bots or thugs. Thugs are actually better than maces generally, in most people's opinions. So thugs are more often seen from Cortex, but rocket bots are still slightly favored than the thugs are. Keep scaling, keep building more. At about 8 minutes, you want to think about looking if anyone is teching on your team, and by about 10 minutes you'd like to have T2 somewhere. But again, this depends on the map state. The lower you are, the newer you are, the less you need to worry about this. And as you're walking along, remember you can drop LLTs anywhere if you are worried about the enemy leaking into your base. And remember, repeat is useful. So, final notes on this is any inactivity is a waste of time and is going to slow down your build order. Any idling of your commander is bad. Any movement by your commander during the build order is bad. It will slow you down. So you want your commander to stand as still as possible. The downside to this is that if you don't move your commander at all, you're going to have to build your buildings very tightly packed, and this makes your base an amazing target for early bombers. So you have to weigh up the pros and cons of that. But it's still general rule of thumb, move as little as you can during the beginning. Remember to shift queue all your commands, and you should be good for the first 5 minutes of your first bar game. In our next video, we are going to be looking at the different tier 1 units for both Armada and Cortex, as well as how your commander functions as a frontline unit and why he is both so good, so important, and so potentially game losing. So on that note, best of luck out there, and we will be back soon with Bar Class number 4.